Breaking just moments ago, MS Now has just confirmed Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard referred the whistleblower whose complaint led to the first impeachment of President Trump and the Inspector General, who deemed their complaint credible, for possible criminal prosecution by the Trump Justice Department. The move comes days after Gabbard released documents alleging a conspiracy behind Trump's first impeachment. Except, folks, the documents prove no such thing, okay? Also today, the Justice Department that will review this criminal referral is the same one that just asked a federal appeals court to throw out the seditious conspiracy convictions of Proud Boys and Oath Keepers who were sentenced for leading far-right extremist groups and attacking the Capitol on January 6th. Now, Trump had already commuted the sentences of these leaders, but this move would go a step further and erase the convictions. In both instances, the administration, it is not just trying to sanitize the past. It is laying the groundwork for future efforts to undermine elections, and we need to be very clear about that. Joining us now is Mark Elias, someone who is extremely clear, the founder of Democracy Docket and chair of the Elias Law Group.
Mark Elias, what is the DNI doing here?
They're doing Donald Trump's bidding. I mean, they are doing exactly what Simone said. They are trying to weaponize the government against Donald Trump's political opponents, right? So that's the breaking news now, is that, you know, a Department of Justice that has gone after Donald Trump's enemies is now going to presumably go after more of their enemies. You know, the acting attorney general has gone so far as to say that it's the president's duty to have the Department of Justice go after his enemies and that Americans should be happy. Those are his words, not mine. So that's part of it. The second part is what Simone said, which is that they are laying the predicate. They are laying the foundation to say that when they claim that Democrats are interfering with the election or foreign governments are interfering with the elections, that we are to believe them and we are to allow the executive branch to do whatever they deem necessary, including seizing ballots, including taking over voting equipment. And we all need to be aware of that.
Mark, the first part, to put an exclamation point on what you just said, is largely what we see Tulsi Gabbard doing under Trump's instructions, is trying to erase history, as well as elevating the chilling effect on those inside the government who are noble public servants to the extent that there are any remaining after the purge by this administration, who would in the future serve as whistleblowers on the behavior of this administration. It's just struck me that the people who are doing all the criming are the ones going after the folks who aren't. And that, to me, is very telling. I want to go in a very different direction with you for the moment. You and me have a little sidebar, lawyer to lawyer, on this point. I find it intriguing that when you listen to the words of Donald Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, Russell Vought, all of them, every last one of the idiocracy, when they talk about January 6th, when they talk about voting being fraudulent or mail-in ballots being fraudulent, they say all this stuff has happened. And yet, at what point did the conspiracy come together to do all of this? Do you know, people, how involved and detailed it would have to have been for organs of the government to prosecute and put into place all of these various things? I mean, this is the part of the lunacy here, that they want us to believe this grand conspiracy now justifies them going back and rewriting that history, right? Erasing the criminality of the individuals involved because of this conspiracy by the deep state. And yet this happened under his government. It was his Justice Department, his FBI, his DNI, his NSA. All of these people were under his control. You mean none of them in all that time leading up to 2020 could see this conspiracy unfolding? Not a text, not an email, not a telephone call, not a letter, not, clandestine meetings at Starbucks? Come on.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, the last point you made is to me the most important one, is that, Donald Trump acts as if somehow he was the victim of the Biden administration. Let us just remember that, as you point out, Donald Trump was president when all of this was happening, right? And by the way, the thing that he was impeached over, there's a transcript of the call. Like,
Yes.
you don't have to listen. You don't have to listen to any witness. You don't even have to listen to a whistleblower. All you have to do is read the transcript, and you can see what he was doing with Vladimir Zelensky on that phone call. So it is like, he needs to start by saying, set aside the transcript, and then believe that my entire administration was the deep state against me. But look, this is the reason why, to turn to the recent news out of Hungary, I think we need to take partial comfort, but not complete comfort. Like, yes, it shows that people, if they are determined, can show up and vote and turn out a dictator. However, Donald Trump's movement is quite different than Orban's was. Orban's was a nationalist movement, a terrible nationalist movement, but a nationalist movement. Donald Trump's is a Trump movement. It is about him. Yeah. It's not about the country. It's not about America first. It's about Donald Trump first. And core to that is the belief that Donald Trump is always the victim. He is the victim of elections. He's the victim of foreign governments. He's the victim of the deep state in his own administration. He is always the victim. And that makes him a lot more dangerous in many respects, and is the reason why we all need to stay on guard.
Mark, I don't think you move to try to rewrite the conditions or the history of January 6th unless you need those conditions right now. I don't think you move to install people who were election deniers in the government unless you want those people to act on their actions in official capacities. I don't think you dismantle accountability unless accountability is actually a threat to what's happening here. We often talk about how this is about this upcoming midterms. This is from ProPublica about the president's effort to take over the midterm elections. The people we identified as resisting attempts to overturn the 2020 results have been replaced by roughly 24, that's 24 people Trump has installed in positions that could affect elections, 10 of them actively working to reverse the 2020 vote, and the rest are associates of such people. These are the folks inside the government right now.
Yeah, look, Simone, you and I see eye to eye on this completely. And I'll add a couple of things. You don't seize the ballots in Fulton County just because you want the ballots from 2020, but rather you do it because you're planning for 2026. You don't subpoena ballot images from Maricopa County from 2020, except that you also want to know how to do that for 2026. A Republican sheriff in California doesn't see 650,000 ballots from a referendum that took place last year, which was a landslide, unless you are trying to figure out how to do it for 2026. Donald Trump doesn't issue an executive order saying that he is going to create a list of who is eligible to vote by mail and send it to the Postal Service and say, you cannot allow any other person to mail their ballots if they're not on my list. You don't do that unless you care about the 2026 election. You don't start to lie about foreign interference unless you are setting the predicate to lie about foreign interference in 2026. So, Simone, I agree with you. And one of the great tragedies of this time is how few people are recognizing that what Donald Trump is doing is not just relitigating history. He is laying the groundwork for the future.
Laying the groundwork for the future, and the question, of course, is who is going to be around him. I want you to take a listen to a conversation, an interview that NBC's Laura Jarrett had with acting AG Todd Blanche.
Every single person in this administration, me included, and obviously Attorney General Bondi as well, we serve at the pleasure of the president, and that's true of any administration. And so the president has the right and the duty and the obligation to make sure that he has folks that he wants. And the president may choose somebody besides me to be the Attorney General today. I can't speak to his thinking. I can't speak to what happened the past year. All I can say is that we have a very defined mission that we've been trying to execute and will continue to execute.
If the president of the United States says, go steal me an election, and you serve at the pleasure of the president, what does that then mean for a democracy?
Well, I mean, what it means is that you either have honor and dignity and you resign, or you do what Todd Blanche is saying he would do. I mean, Todd Blanche has been very clear, and it makes him a extraordinarily dangerous liar. You know, you all have interviewed a lot of politicians, and I say this with due respect and affection for many of them. But there's a way politicians lie, and that's the way that Pam Bondi lied. She would say, no, I am not doing the bidding of the president. I would never do a political prosecution. Todd Blanche is a criminal defense lawyer. whole different mentality. His job is to take inconvenient facts and not deny them, but rather make them seem like they're good facts. Like, yes, of course, my client had a bloody knife in his hand. Innocent person wouldn't have the bloody knife in his hand? And so what he says is, of course we would do what the president says, Alicia. That's a good thing. That's democracy, right? So he embraces it as if doing the president's bidding to go after his political opponents, to undermine free and fair elections, as if that is a virtue instead of the totalitarian actions of an authoritarian.
According to Donald Trump and what he's been saying today, this war is just about over.
Is this war over?
I think it's close to over, yeah. I mean, I view it as very close to over. They have nothing left. They're going to make a deal.
Now, look, that would be great news if true. But I don't think, to state the complete obvious here, that anyone should take the president for his word. Because he has said this exact same thing over and over and over again for basically more than a month now.
And they're calling, they're saying, how do we make a deal? I said, you're being a little bit late. They want to negotiate, and as they should. So they called. I didn't call. They called. They want to make a deal. And the other side, I can tell you, they'd like to make a deal. They are negotiating, by the way, and they want to make a deal so badly, but they're afraid to say it. The reason they want to make a deal is they have been just beat to shit. They're begging to make a deal. They're begging to make a deal. They would like to be able to make a deal. I can't say any more than that. They'd like to make a deal very badly, very badly.
Now, maybe this time is different. We all should hope there's a deal. Maybe now Iran really does want to make a deal. Maybe Trump is negotiating with the secret Iranians in his mind. We don't know. But trusting him on this front is a little bit like Charlie Brown trusting Lucy with the football. I mean, at this point, if you believe him, that's kind of on you. But as obvious as this verbal tick of Trump's is, it also may have a very different purpose. You see, every time Trump claims Iran wants a deal, the stock market believes him. I mean, that clip I showed you of Trump saying the war was close to over and that Iran wanted to make a deal, that aired this morning on Fox Business, just before the markets opened. And like clockwork, the stock market jumped up. As one financial analyst told NBC News today, quote, as far as the stock market is concerned, the war is over until further notice. Well, thank you, stock market, I suppose, because that would certainly be news to the more than 50,000 American troops currently in the region. And unfortunately, it's just not the case. I mean, the reality is that Trump has never been a trustworthy news source here, obviously. Remember in the first days of this war, Trump said it would last 4 weeks max, maybe less. 4 weeks after saying that, Trump said it would be another 2 or 3 weeks. That was 2 weeks ago. And right now, the reality is that we are a week and a half through a 2-week ceasefire, and we just can't trust a word he says. We also can't necessarily trust the people who are negotiating on his behalf. Let me show you what I mean. I mean, today, in response to Trump's new blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran threatened to blockade more shipping lanes in the region, saying that unless Trump calls off his blockade, Iran will block all trade coming in and out of the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, and the Red Sea. That would cut the world off from even more of the global supplies of oil and fertilizer and would be a massive blow to the world economy. Blocking the Red Sea would include the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which alone accounts for about 12% of global oil shipments. And that's on top of, that's not even a part of the 20% that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. And it would be an especially huge blow to Saudi Arabia because, and we're seeing this really play out. I mean, for days now, we've been seeing reports that Saudi Arabia has been pushing the U.S. to drop Trump's blockade because they were afraid Iran would do this exact thing that they are threatening to do. And that lobbying effort, the idea that what Saudi Arabia wants and what Trump wants are two different things. That is particularly significant when you remember that one of the people leading negotiations with Iran right now is this guy.
What are the, I would say, things you have in your mind, in your body that you are using to be a deal maker in this very complex, I would say, field, which is peace?
Yeah, so I think peace is not that different than business.
Okay. That's, of course, Trump's son-in-law. You all know who he is, Jared Kushner. That was him 3 weeks ago, 28 days into Trump's war with Iran. And the event he was speaking at was a Saudi investment conference in Miami, Florida. It was hosted by none other than Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And even though Kushner is currently one of Trump's top negotiators with Iran, he was introduced at this Saudi investment event as a private citizen, as the founder and chief executive of his investment firm, Affinity Partners. You know, the investment firm of Kushner's that got a cool $2 billion from the Saudis after Trump's first term, that one. Now, the firm that the New York Times reports Kushner is actively trying to raise another $5 billion for from Gulf states like Saudi Arabia, while also leading negotiations with Iran, all happening same time. Now, I should note that in the months since the Times published that scoop, Kushner's firm has said that it does not intend to take in any additional capital while Jared is volunteering for the government. But the thing is, that commitment certainly doesn't exist once he leaves, and it certainly looks like he is lining up investments for when that day comes. Now, the obvious problem here is that Kushner has a clear conflict of interest. The White House insists that Kushner only acts in the best interest of the American people. But now one of his biggest benefactors, a country that has pumped literally billions of dollars into his company's coffers, a country that he's now asking to give him billions of dollars more, that country disagrees with Trump on how the U.S. should be negotiating with Iran. And Jared is one of the top negotiators. Today, Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund announced its strategy for the next 4 years of investments. The fund says it plans to prioritize domestic investments inside Saudi Arabia, meaning maybe not investing as much in firms run by the son-in-laws of U.S. presidents. We'll see. But hey, maybe if Kushner plays his cards right, the Saudis will change their mind. Now, I should say that Kushner is adamant that his business life and his diplomatic life are two separate things. But it's impossible not to see the connections here. I mean, Jared isn't the only walking, talking conflict of interest on the U.S. side of these negotiations either. Today, the Financial Times reported that the Saudis may also be backing out of their American Golf League, LIV Golf. LIV Golf is, of course, the league that was a lifeline for Trump and his empire of golf courses after the PGA cut ties with Trump following January 6th. And while the White House has said that the president has no involvement in any business deals that would implicate his constitutional responsibilities as president, the Financial Times noted specifically that the Saudis have not fully made up their mind on whether they are ditching LIV Golf or not yet. They might stop funding the golf league that puts money in Trump's pockets. They might not. Either way, it's a signal that their largesse toward the Trump family, well, it might have limits. We'll see. Then there's Trump's other chief negotiator, former real estate developer Steve Witkoff. Right before Trump took office last year, an investment firm tied to the United Arab Emirates bought a $500 million stake in the cryptocurrency firm founded by Trump and Witkoff's families. Months later, a fund backed by the country made a $2 billion deal using the Trump and Witkoff family digital coins. Now, the White House has said that Witkoff does not participate in any official matters that could impact his financial interests. But could we get that map of the trade routes Iran is threatening to blockade up there on the screen again? Huh? That certainly seems like it would be bad for Saudi Arabia and the UAE. You can see that just by looking at the map. Good thing they have really good relationships with the key negotiators in charge. Now, Vance is there with them, but this is the U.S. delegation. This is the team we have entrusted the lives of more than 50,000 U.S. troops to. Yes, two real estate developers riddled with conflicts of interest and J.D. Vance. And it has all been a reminder to me of what diplomacy and the team who leads it is supposed to be. I mean, remember the people who led the negotiations with Iran during the Iran negotiations back during the JCPOA negotiations were people like veteran diplomat Bill Burns, a man who had negotiated with Vladimir Putin when he was ambassador to Russia and with Gaddafi when he was a high-level Middle East envoy. People like Wendy Sherman, who already had the experience of negotiations with North Korea over their nuclear weapons program under President Clinton, before running point on issues ranging from China to Syria to eventually Iran during the Obama administration. And hundreds of experts who were pulled together from across the national security agencies of government, career and foreign service officials, who had spent decades working on issues that were relevant to the technical aspects of the negotiations. And now we have these guys, real estate developers with massive conflicts of interest. Now, as we look ahead to next Tuesday's deadline to extend the ceasefire, as we think about the fate of the more than 50,000 U.S. troops in the region, it's worth remembering that the negotiating team we have today is still primarily the team that got us into this mess in the first place, before a single missile had been fired in this war, before oil prices skyrocketed and U.S. troops lost their lives. Iran reportedly put a deal on the table with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, and they didn't take it. Witkoff himself said that 36 hours before the U.S. and Israel started bombing Iran, Iran presented the U.S. with a 7-page proposal for a potential nuclear deal. And according to reporting from The Guardian, Britain's national security advisor attended those final talks and believed that the deal offered by Iran was significant enough to prevent a rush to war. And now another diplomat, one from the Persian Gulf, told MS Now that the Iranians told Witkoff that they were willing to give up their highly enriched uranium. But for whatever reason, Kushner and Witkoff didn't take that deal. The White House denied that story, saying that Iran refused to negotiate seriously and that Trump was essentially forced to attack them to prevent an imminent nuclear threat. A threat that I should mention no credible expert believes Iran was anywhere close to achieving. So considering how plainly wrong the White House's justification is here, why did Kushner and Witkoff turn down by what, by all accounts, was a good deal? And the kind of deal that the White House seems to now desperately be trying to get. The kind of deal that Trump keeps saying Iran is so close to agreeing to. Well, former National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan thinks he knows what really happened here. So take a listen.
Just a few days before we started bombing Iran, the Iranians put a proposal on the table in Geneva that went a long way towards resolving the nuclear issue. And my understanding is that our side, our negotiators, simply didn't understand what they were being offered, and they ignored it and decided to go ahead and strike.
Our guys didn't understand. Was it in Farsi? What? I don't.
Hi there, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in New York. So what does a president sitting in the mid-30s in terms of public approval, riding a wave of rebukes from inside his own political coalition do to sort of turn things around for himself? If you guessed exonerate the most violent insurrectionists who were convicted of seditious conspiracy on January 6th, then you win. In an exercise that increasingly reads more like The Onion than real news, Donald Trump today moved to clear 12 leaders of the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys convicted of seditious conspiracy against the United States of America. In the words of Congressman Jamie Raskin, it turns the Department of Justice into, quote, in-house counsel for the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. While Donald Trump commuted the sentences of the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys on day one of his second term, what the Trump Justice Department is asking for is to erase their guilty verdicts and dismiss the charges with prejudice. A dismissal with prejudice prevents the government from bringing the cases again. Congressman Jamie Raskin calls it, quote, an appalling and dangerous turn of events, adding, quote, the same DOJ that prosecuted these men and secured their criminal convictions beyond any reasonable doubt is now asking a court to whitewash their crimes and pretend that they never led the insurrectionist mob that beat, crushed indoors, wounded, injured, and hospitalized 140 of our law enforcement officers, disfiguring and disabling some of them for life. These motions are part of Donald Trump's continuing campaign to placate and curry favor with the extreme right, which acts as his private sworn militia. If that's not enough for you, if you're not disgusted yet, Todd Blanche, who now runs DOJ after Donald Trump fired Pam Bondi, says you should be happy about all of that. Happy to see Donald Trump use DOJ like this to punish Trump's political adversaries and critics and reward his allies. Watch.
So he is somebody who has high expectations for his cabinet and for this administration. It's not just the Department of Justice, it's in every single area. And so that type of communication from President Trump should make every American happy, because it means that there's an executive, a chief executive, that is making sure every one of his cabinet members are working as hard as they should.
You should be happy. Just as alarming as Todd Blanche telling you should be happy about how Trump is using DOJ, you should know he's also using it to harass Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Watch some of that.
But I think the Federal Reserve building is just as bad. And so whether it's incompetence, corruption, or both, I think you have to find out. I really do. I think you have to find out.
So you're not going to drop the probe?
No, I'm not playing. I have to find out.
And he said he's not leaving if,
Well, then I'll have to fire him, okay? If he's not leaving on time, I've held back firing him. I've wanted to fire him, but I hate to be controversial, I want to be uncontroversial.
Yes, because it's so easy for you to hold yourself back. We see that every night on social media. Trump's push to investigate Jerome Powell, though, has stalled not only the confirmation of Powell's replacement, but it kills any chance of a resignation from Powell, who says he has, quote, no intention of stepping down until the investigation is over. The investigation was derailed by a federal judge last month who called it an effort, quote, to harass and pressure Powell to resign or give in to Trump's demand for him to lower interest rates. But a source confirms new reporting by the Wall Street Journal that says federal prosecutors still made a surprise visit to the Federal Reserve's headquarters yesterday, and two of the deputies working for Jeanine Pirro were advised that they could not access the site without pre-clearance. Wall Street Journal reporting that an outside lawyer for the Fed wrote this to Pirro's office, pointing to the previous ruling, saying, quote, should you wish to challenge that finding, the courts provide an avenue for you. It is not appropriate for you to try to circumvent it. I ask that you commit to not seek to communicate with my client outside of the presence of counsel. Donald Trump using the Department of Justice to achieve his most politically toxic aims is where we start today with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. Senior investigative reporter Carol Leonnig is with us here at the table. Also joining us, former Department of Justice pardon attorney Liz Oyer is here. She was fired by Trump's Justice Department leadership last March after refusing to reinstate actor Mel Gibson's gun rights. And with me for the hour, my dear friend, contributor Mike Barnicle. Carol Leonnig, this is your beat. Take me through what sort of bubble they're in that Todd Blanche thinks we should be happy. Who should be happy, other than the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers?
You know, I think there are two potential audiences for these actions, actually, Nicole. One of them is, I think we all know, in addition from our own reporting here at MS Now, that Todd Blanche is auditioning to be the not acting Attorney General, but to be the full-term, full-time Attorney General. And so his audience is Donald Trump. Donald Trump believes he's going to please and placate that extreme right that you talked about in the opening. But going for both of these steps, vacating the actions of people who were convicted of seditious conspiracy, and then moving, as Perot is moving, to try to continue to investigate Jerome Powell. Again, she's trying to audition for the job as well. She, we are told by sources, is also trying to please that audience of one, Donald Trump, because a federal judge has said, stop, you don't have the evidence. You don't have any evidence to open this kind of investigation. I do know from some reporting I did today in preparation for coming on and talking with you that sources say Perot does not believe that the chief judge will succeed on appeal. And therefore, she's concluded in her legal assessment, which is a little early, a little premature to do so, but that she's concluded that a judge can't tell a prosecutor what to do in an investigation. And that's why she's proceeding the way she is.
And so she dispatched the prosecutors yesterday to...
Authorized it for sure.
In defiance of a federal judge?
Yes.
Because she thinks she'll prevail.
She thinks she will ultimately prevail, and it's not his place to tell her what to do. You know, and I will say this, in fairness, in full transparency, what the judge did is really unusual, and I said this, I think, at the time, probably on your show. It is really unusual for a judge to take this step and make it public so early in a potential criminal investigation, because it's a huge slap in the face. But it's not unusual for a judge to conclude, hey, I've looked at the evidence in camera, under seal, with no one watching, and you got bupkis, which is ultimately what Judge Boasberg found.
I mean, it feels like a Rubicon crossing, though, Liz. I mean, a judge is ruling on the specific absence of evidence against Jerome Powell. But wittingly or unwittingly, the judge is also weighing in, I think, on whether or not Trump can manufacture criminality against a political adversary. And so it feels like nothing less than sort of the future of this norm of our democracy, of not turning the courts into the banana republic that DOJ has become, hinges on how this turns out.
Yeah, there are a couple things going on here. One is that the courts are getting tired of seeing Donald Trump try to accomplish ends that are purely political using the legal system. What Donald Trump wants at the end of the day is never going to happen. He wants convictions where there is no crime, and that is just not possible as long as the courts hold up their end of the bargain under the Constitution, and as long as the citizens who serve on grand juries and juries refuse to indict and convict people where there is no evidence. Donald Trump is growing increasingly frustrated with that pushback from other parts of the system, but that's how our system is intended to work. And Judge Boasberg is sending the message here that the president cannot fool around with the legal system to achieve political ends. Jeanine Pirro's role in all of this is largely performative. She may or may not believe that Judge Boasberg's ruling will hold up, but what she knows is that she will get a headline out of sending her prosecutors to this construction site. It is a stunt. It is a performance. Federal prosecutors do not go to construction sites to walk around. There is nothing that could productively be accomplished by two federal prosecutors who have legal responsibilities in the courtroom by going down to a construction site and walking around. There's absolutely nothing other than a performance stunt. And this is what members of this DOJ do. Frankly, we saw Ed Martin, who's currently the pardon attorney occupying my old job, do this in the past. He and his assistant went to Letitia James's home in New York and walked around and staged a photo opportunity outside of her brownstone. It's all performance for the audience of one, Donald Trump, and it really has nothing to do with making cases within the rules of the justice system.
I want to bring in MS Now's Jackie Alemany, who covers the White House. Mark McKinnon was an advisor to President George W. Bush and John McCain, as well as creator of The Circus. David Drucker is senior writer at The Dispatch, author of the book In Trump's Shadow, and an MS Now contributor. So, Mark, when you see Vance making that kind of admission, frankly, at an event that's typically all in with this administration, and add to that the empty seats you see in the arena, does it tell us anything about how the war is impacting the ties between the president and his party?
Yeah, it says something's up, Chris. You know, I went to a Charlie Kirk rally in 2024 when, you know, a lot of media weren't paying attention to him because I'd been seeing some of his TikToks, and I went to a rally in Athens, Georgia, and it was just a sea of red hats, and the square was so packed I couldn't even get through it. So just to go from that to see this vision yesterday of Vance at this rally, and it confirms, in my mind, one key thing, which is that for a lot of voters, but especially younger voters, the notion of no more conflicts, which is what, and foreign entanglements, foreign wars, which is what Trump and Vance especially ran on, I think that that's a pretty clear signal from that turnout yesterday, the trouble's ahead unless they get out of this fast.
And David, I want to play part of what we heard from some of those attendees when they were asked about the war specifically.
I think Trump is a silly goose, and he does things that are silly. I personally don't think we should be fighting wars in the Middle East.
I just think it could have been handled a little bit better. I think a lot of things could have been handled better. But like I said, I'm willing to support him just because I feel like the opposite is just not the answer.
So the vice president tried to argue that Republicans can be against the war and still be with the White House more generally, which seems to be what that one woman was saying. But in a world where traditional politics, where that might have worked, has sort of been thrown out the door, do you think there are real warning signs, David?
Well, look, we know there are warning signs. There's been some real attrition from the president's 2024 coalition, which includes a range of voters, including these younger voters, many of whom voted for the first time because they just recently came of age. And for them in particular, even though Republicans broadly support the war, but for these younger voters in particular, they joined the president's coalition in part because he did run on this idea that he wasn't going to get the U.S. into foreign conflicts, particularly in the Middle East, and particularly not conflicts that drag on in this endless sense, or this feeling that it's an endless sense. And I think the longer we're involved in the war and that it can't really be declared over, the more difficult it's going to be for the president and Republicans in Congress, because you're going to see more and more restlessness from Republican voters. Look, as I travel the country, I talk to Republican voters all the time, and that includes just last week in Indiana who take issue with some elements of the president's agenda, but still support him and will still show up to vote for Republicans this fall. The question is, how many of those Republicans are there? And right now, the congressional Republicans are in a spot where they're going to see diminished turnout and diminished support, particularly because Trump's not on the ballot, but because you have a lot more discontent right now than you had a year ago.
Yeah, and if you stay home because you don't like the other side, as that woman said, the Democrats, presumably, who are running against the Republicans, that's like a vote for the Democrat if they lose that Republican vote, right? Jackie, the president seemed to almost acknowledge today that support is slipping, or at least that his messaging hasn't worked, although he hasn't made any apologies. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, Chris, Vice President J.D. Vance isn't the only one who is revealing his cards more, and this is quite unusual for a president who, at least over the past few weeks, has struck back vigorously against critics, people like Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who have castigated him for this decision to go to war. But this revealing comment comes on the heels of the war sending inflation soaring, gas prices to a record high in March, the largest percentage increase that we've seen in modern history, and consumer sentiment completely plummeting. Let's give him a listen, and we'll talk more about it on the other side.
We took this path. We knocked the hell out of Iran. They have nothing left. They're going to make a deal. We'll see what happens. We have to explain to the voters, so importantly, the great job that we've done.
So essentially what you're hearing from the president there is an admission that the stated reason for going to this war has not been clearly articulated by the president or the administration, something that has been noted since the start of the war, and him acknowledging that voters also are not understanding it, perhaps seeing the same polling that we're seeing. But I was talking with a pollster last week trying to understand why the MAGA base hasn't quite slipped the way other constituencies and sort of the non-MAGA Republicans have plummeted so far, who basically said that for voters, especially MAGA voters who listen to a lot of conservative media, people, again, like Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, that when they take their opinion cues from them, the approval rates don't immediately plummet, and that it would take some time for those numbers to ultimately drop down and trickle down. As you noted, Chris, at the top, those numbers, even amongst the MAGA faithful, are not as high as other approval ratings that you're seeing on other different issues, and are now you're starting to see mission creep as well when it comes to approval ratings on the economy and other key macro indicators. The other issue that this president is facing politically right now, again, is those non-MAGA Republicans, especially when you're looking ahead to 2026 midterms in November, where the House is fighting for a very, very slim majority, and you're having lots of purple districts where these small slices of the electorate are so important. We're going to see, I think, the White House, as we pivot towards November, try to clean up the messaging there to bring those non-MAGA voters back in.
Yeah, that becomes the question, right, Mark? How do you clean up the messaging, to steal that terminology, when Donald Trump, the leader of the party, has shown no sign of backing off from the message, we are winning and we are safer? Oh, and by the way, gas prices are going to come down.
Yeah, and Chris, even the economists who know a lot more than I do about this say that even if the conflict stopped tomorrow, the economic drag would last at least another 200 days. So that's the best case scenario, and it's unlikely to stop anytime soon. So it's a huge problem for Trump and for Republicans going into the midterms, which were already challenging. But the fundamental point that I think, threads through everything that we've all been saying here is the thing about midterm elections particularly is that it's really mostly about enthusiasm of the base. Is your base enthusiastic to vote? But it's hard to see under any circumstances where Republicans under the current scenario, or even a little bit rosier one, are going to be very excited about voting, because even if the conflict is in some way mitigated in the short term, it's still hard to see how we were in much better shape now than we were before the conflict.
David, the Reuters poll found that 20% of Republicans now say the war was not worth it, and another 24% aren't sure. Has the Iran war been worth it? Was the question. They aren't, at least 44% of them aren't sure. Is that level of distrust a problem long term? And when I say long term, I'm looking to November. Or could it go away? We have seen so often in this landscape how what seems like today's huge problem suddenly is in the rearview mirror and something else takes over.
Yeah, look, the Iran war in and of itself could end in the next few weeks, let's say, right? And then we're no longer talking about it in the same way. But I think that the broader vulnerabilities that the president and his party are facing are not going to go away. To Mark's point, economists call this the rockets and feathers theory, right? When you have geopolitical instability that forces gas prices up, they go up like a rocket, as the saying goes. But even if you can eliminate the instability and get things back to normal, they tend to drift down like a feather. And so it takes a long time for oil prices to get back down. And so it's going to take a long time, even if this thing ended today as we speak, it would take into the fall, the heart of the midterm election season, for gas prices to come down, for jet fuel prices that affect airline tickets to come down, fertilizer prices that are impacted by higher oil prices, all of this. And this is simply exacerbating a problem the administration and Republicans already had. Voters, by and large, do not think that the high cost of living is under control. And the president, according to most voters, when you look at polling, is insufficiently focused on this problem. When he does talk about it, he says he's already defeated it and let's move on. And so you can deal with the war, which could have been messaged better, which could have been justified better. There's a great case to make for it, even if you disagree with it, that the president really didn't make in a sustained way. But you can deal with that, and you're still going to have this other problem there that hasn't gone away and has probably been made worse because of the conflict.
Mark, the Hill's political editor is arguing in something he wrote today that the MAGA break with Trump on Iran is imaginary, that the media is not going to find many people who are actually part of MAGA but critical of Trump. He writes, it would be a level of cognitive dissonance that would eventually have to be resolved by either leaving the tribe or swallowing their doubts. Cults of personality don't do reasonable dissent. Is he right about that? And acknowledging that in a purple district, just having MAGA is not going to win for you this November.
Well, I apparently he wasn't at the Turning Point USA event yesterday because he would have seen that this is a big issue for younger MAGA voters particularly. But again, even if you're a MAGA voter, a typical MAGA voter, an older MAGA voter, you probably have a pretty strong opinion about this. It may not mean you're going to go vote for Democrats, but it sure as hell may mean that you're not very excited about going out to vote in November and just stay home.
President is going after the Pope again.
Oh, no, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah,
no,
it's like
not a good move.
Hot stove. Trump posted last night on social media, quote, will someone please tell Pope Leo that Iran has killed at least 42,000 innocent, completely unarmed protesters in the last 2 months, and that for Iran to have a nuclear bomb is absolutely unacceptable. Iran has acknowledged more than 3,000 deaths, while the UN estimates that number to be between 5 and 20,000. It is not clear what exactly may have sparked the message from the president. The Pope yesterday morning posted in part, quote, God's heart is torn apart by wars, violence, injustice, and lies. But our Father's heart is not with the wicked, the arrogant, or the proud. Vice President J.D. Vance also weighed in on the Pope during a Turning Point USA event at the University of Georgia yesterday. Take a look.
Now, we can, of course, have disagreements about whether this or that conflict is just, but I think that it's important, in the same way that it's important for the Vice President of the United States to be careful when I talk about matters of public policy. I think it's very, very important for the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology. I think one of the issues here is that if you're going to opine on matters of theology, you've got to be careful. You've got to make sure it's anchored in the truth. And that's one of the things that I try to do. And it's certainly something I would expect from the clergy, whether they're Catholic or Protestant.
What are you, a king in medieval Europe warning the Pope not to talk about the Bible? That's what you just said. You know how stupid you sound, right? You know how stupid you sound when you, new to the Catholic Church, are lecturing Mr. Vice President, the pontiff, on theology and telling him he should not quote the red letters. Those are the words, by the way, that Jesus spoke. The red letters in the Gospels of Jesus Christ. And by the way, you don't have to, sort through a lot of it. Just look at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the peacemakers. See, this is his concern.
Did someone ask him, or
his concern
did he
is
just,
not geopolitics. His concern is not geopolitics. His concern is not the fighting his concern has to do with peace. Has to do, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are the meek, blessed are the poor in spirit, he is concerned, Jonathan Lemire, with the teachings of Jesus Christ and how utterly bizarre. People will look back one day and laugh when they have the safety of distance and laugh that you actually have a vice president sitting on stage warning the Pope, God's representative here on earth for the Catholic Church, warning the Pope what he can and cannot say about theology, that he needs to be careful. Well, let me tell you something. I never hear those warnings when he's talking about abortion. I never hear those warnings when he's talking about traditional marriage. I don't hear those warnings when those warnings align with his political views. But there's a war that, let us just say, started with the killing of over 150 young girls at a school that the United States lied about initially and said, oh, we had nothing to do with that. No, that wasn't us. That was Iran. Is the Pope going to get involved in that? Is the Pope going to be concerned about that? Does the Pope think that Jesus Christ cares? Whether it's Americans or Iranians or people from other countries who are winning or losing wars? No. The Pope would probably believe, like another guy from Illinois, Abraham Lincoln, that his concern is not whether we are on God's side, but whether God is on our side. And so to hear a sitting vice president of the United States, first of all, becoming a Catholic last week and then writing a book about being a Catholic and then lecturing the Pope, I've got to say, that's like an all-timer. And people are going to look back and they're going to have a big chuckle that anybody was ever that arrogant in that position.
Yeah, the history books. I often wonder 20, 30, 40 years from now just exactly what they'll say. This will deserve perhaps its own chapter. Yeah, there's a short list of people who probably can weigh in on matters of theology. I think the Pope probably on that list. That's just my guess. And you're right, Jay, but J.D. Vance, I will say in front of a sparsely attended crowd there at the Turning Point rally, to do that in the same speech, by the way, and we'll get to this later, I'm sure, where he said he was proud to deny funding to Ukraine, not just that.
Wait, hold on a second. Is that a Falcons football game? Can we see those? Can we see those seats again?
Wait. The smallest crowd in Atlanta since. Yes.
Whoa. Since the last time the Falcons played, and I'm a huge Falcons fan, but this is Boring Points USA. Like that's not good.
No, that's not good, and certainly. And certainly Vice President Vance's comments there about both Ukraine and the Pope, just, beyond the pale for many. So, Mark Caputo, let's bring you in on this. I mean, a fifth of Americans identify as Catholic. President Trump, was, criticized even by some within the GOP for his posting that depicted him as Jesus. He claimed he was a doctor. That's not true. But that hasn't stopped him from criticizing the Pope. He did it again last night. Does anyone in the White House think this is a good idea?
Well, he did pull it down. He did pull down the original post after a significant number of advisors, both inside and outside the White House, asked him not to do it. But as his True Social account shows, when Donald Trump gets animated about something, he doesn't let it go. And therefore, it was at midnight or after midnight, this sort of behavior or these sorts of thoughts come out of him and wind up on his True Social account. And there is a general sense in the White House and in Trump's broader orbit that the best thing to do is to sort of let Trump be Trump and hope he doesn't go too far outside of the guardrails. And if he does, to try to reel him back slowly. And they did that the other day. But I think the rest of this is sort of a sunken cost.
My goodness. White House reporter for Axios, Mark Caputo, thank you very much. His latest reporting for Axios on the U.S. easing bank sanctions amid Venezuela's economic woes is online now.